he could hold in his hands like a javelin, really, anything he could lift up, including monsters. Combine it with gravity control magic, and he'd be more of a threat than nearly any mass-based weapon. I'd say the skill was more suited for effectively taking on entire armies instead of single targets. Finally, Zen's unique skill was a kind of mix of useful tools. The unique skill observer allowed him to instinctively dodge threats, detect danger and traps, and discover monsters and other presences before they appeared. He could even pick up on Shinji's viral clouds. All this was combined with Zen's own fighting abilities, which made him capable of evading or fleeing just about anything. He was fast, he was nimble, and traps basically didn't work on him, the mortal enemy of any labyrinth. That about summed it up. It was a real buffet of sweet-looking skills, and I'd definitely be gaining some inspiration from them. Each one was a huge boon by itself, but they also worked so well with one another, the real key to this trio's record-making run. I don't think I could be blamed for assuming they'd steamroll right over Adalman, but I was wrong. Turns out Adalman had spent the past few months getting buff, so to speak. I mean, normally, a non-sentient monster would never really change in terms of fighting ability from what it's originally granted. If it could survive several decades or so, you'd see some improvement then, but the process took more than a few years, at least. And then we have Adalman and Alberto here. Like, what is this? How did these guys get so powerful? And also, what the heck's up with that dragon? Peeking into the boss chamber, I spotted Adalman, Albert, and an evil-looking dragon I had never seen before, nearly 40 feet in length and oozing a deadly-looking miasma from its mouth. Who the hell dragged that in? Something clearly had been going on while I was out on my international tour. Heh. Surprised, aren't ya? I kinda kept this from you on purpose, but you know how you gave those guys some new equipment? Well, they really dug that stuff, so they've been working extremely hard on their training. And you know how high the magicule levels are across the dungeon, right? Well, they've been absorbing some of it, and now Adalman and Alberto have regained their old powers. Ramirez sounded like a guy on a prank video revealing everything to the victim, and, yeah, taking a closer look, Adalman had evolved from white to White King. He was still a skeleton, and his gear was just as gaudy as ever, so I didn't notice at first, but his magical power was off the charts now. Alberto, meanwhile, had skipped Death Knight entirely and now was a Death Paladin, a super high-level monster. White Kings and Death Paladins have magicule levels about even with an archdemon, don't they? I said. Qua ha. Look at these meek little underlings, striving so hard to be of aid to us. They made evolution sound so easy, and what's more, they powered up beyond anything I could have guessed. What about that dragon? Oh, didn't you know, Rimuru? That's Adalman's pet. Ramirez announced. Pet? Come to think of it, I did remember Adalman talking about keeping a pet, maybe. I just didn't expect it to be this wicked-looking dragon. It was, in fact, a death dragon, the alpha predator of the undead monster hierarchy. Shuna and the rest of the cabinet were familiar with it, apparently, so Ramirez honestly thought I knew as well. That was my fault, I suppose. It's so important to have everybody on the same page in upper management. So as for how this battle unfolded, well, there's really not much to say. In fact, Adalman didn't even move an inch from his throne, and the death dragon stayed ensconced on his left side. Only Alberto stepped forward, and he beat all of them himself. Mark's Minos Bardiche wasn't even given the time to strut its stuff, it was stopped in its tracks by the similarly unique class Cursed Sword, and Mark was promptly slashed down afterward. The sight stopped Zen in his tracks, leaving him open for a moment, and Alberto seized the opportunity. His speed made him almost seem to disappear for a moment as he unleashed upon Zen, and that by itself spelled the end for him. This made Shinji mutter in surprise. He scrambled toward Alberto, blasting out a holy cannon magic spell. This was a common ability among paladins, but not many civilians had access to it. Shinji didn't mention any paladin training in his immigration papers, so I imagine it was a hidden last resort for him. This spell was suited for speed, and it landed a clean, direct hit on Alberto. It seemed like he dodged it for a moment, but maybe Alberto let his guard down, or so I thought. But I had no reason to worry. Alberto simply didn't move, because he had no need to evade it. Shinji managed to squeak out an "Oh, come on," before Alberto swung his sword down upon him. Then it was all over. But, I mean, Alberto's still undead, right? Isn't he weak against the holy attribute? I know I'm not the only one to think that, but Alberto was kept safe, and it was entirely thanks to Adalman. It turned out to be his previously hidden extra skill, known as Holy Evil Inversion, at work. Report. Holy Evil Inversion is a secret skill crafted by the subject Adalman. It has the effect of swapping the holy attribute with the evil one and vice versa. Adalman used this to change Alberto's attribute from evil to holy. The effect didn't extend to his equipment, but since Alberto was undead, there wasn't any life force for his cursed gear to suck away, so his elemental attribute didn't matter along those lines. Plus, if an ally applied that skill to him, there was no chance of his body resisting it. A holy undead? What kind of joke was this? It was unholy, if anything, but Adalman's holy evil inversion made it a reality. And as a spiritual life form, Adalman had natural resistances to each kind of elemental attack. Most melee strikes didn't work on him. As a duo, they had also overcome their weakness against holy attacks. Really, I didn't see how any normal dungeon runner team could take them. So Adalman won, and without even using any of the magic I taught him. Shinji's team was defeated in truly anticlimactic fashion, fading into clouds of light before departing the chamber. Rimuru, my lord, were you watching us? We dedicate this glorious victory to you. Watching Adalman shout this dedication at the top of his non-existent lungs, a thought occurred: isn't Adalman's gang a little too much force to bust out for floor 60? I mean, yeah, I did tell him that if a party approached, he should fight back with a party of his own. He certainly took that advice to heart, and he certainly didn't try to outnumber his opponent, no. But this is getting pretty close to fraud. Like, come on. If you have a special A monster, a calamity-level threat, and 3 of them at once, you could destroy a lot of the smaller kingdoms out there. And by the looks of things, they still had some other tricks they were hiding, too. So I decided to interrogate Ramirez about that later. For now, I needed to offer Adalman my congratulations. Well done, Adalman. Why don't you come up to the control room? No need to talk through the screen like this. Oh, such a joyous honor. I will be by your side post-haste, my lord. As stiflingly formal as always. Well, that's how he is, I suppose. And Alberto can talk as well these days, huh? Can you bring him along? Very well. As for my death dragon? Let's have it keep guard over there, okay? Yes, my lord. The death dragon whimpered a bit about that, but I had to stand firm on this. I mean, it's freaking 40 feet long. Maybe we could fit him in the special chamber we made for Veldora on floor 100, but this control room just ain't that big. I felt kinda bad for the guy, but he'd have to give up on that. So I ordered Shion to make some tea for Adalman and Alberto. Can he drink it? She asked. He's nothing but bones. Aight. Yeah. Looks like Alberto found a body, kind of, but Adalman's still nothing but a skeleton. Maybe he can enjoy the aroma, at least. Well, this is, a polite gesture for him. I see. Very well. We chatted a bit more as we waited for their arrival. We are here, Sir Rimuru. I offer you my sincere gratitude for the honor of personally experiencing your holy visage. Adalman and Alberto both kneeled before me. In person like this instead of through the screen, I realized just how much more powerful they were now. I could hardly believe they were the same people as before. Yes. Well done. Alberto was your name, was it? You have proved to be quite an effective fighter, and, Adelman, you have done an exemplary job as a guardian. Keep up the good work. That's right. Keep it up. Veldora and Ramirez heaped praise on them before I could speak up. If they got to give out all the praise first, I wasn't too sure what I should follow up with, but let's just keep it benign. Yeah, I tell you. It's been a while since I've seen you guys, so I'm kinda shocked at how much you've grown. Grown, or I suppose evolved is the right term, isn't it? That trio was pretty strong, so I seriously thought they'd struggle, but no, I better not say that. Sometimes, there are things better thought than stated out loud. Yes, my lord. Both of them were visibly moved. I had them sit down, trying to hide my pangs of guilt. Truly a fine aroma, said Alberto. If offered by anyone else, I might have taken it as sarcasm, perhaps. Oh yeah? Should have seen that coming. If you can't drink it, it's just unfair, isn't it? But when offered by my lord, I find the scent deeply satisfying for my heart. It has truly rejuvenated my body. Well, great, but Shion made it, so. How delicious. Sweet and fragrant like nectar. I, Alberto, cannot offer enough gratitude for this wondrous moment of bliss. Geez, don't lay it on too much. I guess Alberto had built a physical body for himself with magicules, a kind of temporary vessel, made possible inside the labyrinth. Why don't you take on a full body as well, Adalman? I asked. Pardon me? Well, I mean, then you could enjoy that tea more, so. Why yes, perhaps, my lord, but in my case. Well, I prefer to project a certain image, you could say. That was kinda over my head, but if it was important to Adalman, it's nothing I have a right to comment on. Fair. No need to force it, in that case. I changed the subject. By the way, I was really impressed by how you approached using holy evil inversion. The fact that you developed it at all shows me how hard you've been working. Thank you very much. Saberetta provided me with some assistance, and also, I asked about holy evil inversion as a quick way to shift the topic, but this was actually pretty surprising. It turned out that even Luminous lent him a hand. Lady Luminous taught me day-night inversion, one of her secret techniques, you see. An apology, as she referred to it. Saberetta then applied his unique skill reverser to modify it, and then I was able to master it. And there you have it. I suppose Luminous was apologizing for letting the 7 Days Clergy act out of line. Why was Granville trying to kill someone as talented as Adalman? I had my own reasoning for that. Outside of Granville, the 7 Days Clergy members were all obsessed about keeping their positions safe from threats. They were all trying to eliminate Adalman, but Granville must have reasoned that he'd only be useful if he could overcome the trap they set for him. Instead, Adalman and that dragon zombie killed each other off, something Granville may not have intended. Maybe his perspective was along the lines of, well, if you can't beat an enemy at that level, you'll never become a guardian of humankind anyway or the like. Seeing Granville's final moments, supremely proud but all alone in life, I couldn't help but think that. Still, it wouldn't be right to bring it up with Adalman. It's something I'd like him to realize himself someday, but for now, time for another subject change. Well, that's wonderful. I'll have to send Luminous my thanks later on. But, Adalman. Yes. At this point, you can beat the Guardian of Floor 70, can't you? How do you mean, my lord? He seemed confused, so I spelled it out for him in detail. Currently, floors 61 through 70 were nicknamed the Golem Zone, filled with inorganic, tirelessly working sentries. Some of the specialized area bosses on those floors even wielded test versions of the firearms we were working on. There were also a lot of brutal traps, headed up primarily by land mines, but none of them were particularly lethal. The zone was overall meant as a trial for people playing the healer role in adventuring parties. The main boss of this zone was a new machine, a modified version of the elemental colossus. Vesta had finally completed it with the help of Kaijin. It still boasted the high defense Magisteel offered, but now it was lighter and more compact, making it mobile while keeping the pilot's seat fully protected. It wasn't sentient, but it had room for a pilot inside, although it could also run on the thoughts of a remote pilot. At the moment, I believed Beretta was operating it remotely. I liked that. It certainly eliminated the threat of viral cloud attacks, and not even a Minos Bardiche could cut through a Magisteel body. Its armor also featured a layered structure, the shielding scales from Charybdis granting it the powers of magic interference. It was a completely invincible metal guardian, once the elemental colossus, now called the demon colossus. And I was fully sure Shinji's party would never make it past floor 70. However, after seeing how Adalman fought today, I was starting to reconsider matters. Veldora, who do you think's stronger, Adalman or the demon colossus? Adalman, without a doubt, right? So you see, Adalman, we're going to promote you to floor 70. There you go. If Veldora agreed with me, I couldn't be mistaken. Understood. The power comparison between the subjects Adalman and the demon colossus is. Oh, I don't need the numbers, thanks. This is more about image, so. I, Adalman, promise to expend every effort to live up to your expectations. And I, your humble servant Alberto, promise to support my master, Adalman, with every fiber of my being. They kneeled before me again as they made their pledges. They had changed so much when I'd taken my eyes off them. The demon colossus was hardly any slouch, but honestly, it didn't really have the gravitas a boss needed. That, and if it got broken again, it'd just break our hearts. We have to implant it with a soul, or it wouldn't be subject to Ramiriz's powers in the dungeon, so we can't experiment to see if it'd get resurrected after being smashed up. Maybe with a soul, things would be different, or if there was a pilot inside it, would that work? Oh, but if someone was possessing it, maybe it wouldn't be treated as an item any longer. Regardless, we sadly had no plans along those lines yet. I thus saw no reason why we shouldn't promote Adalman and his crew. All right. Then as of today, I want to have floors 51 through 60 switched with floors 61 through 70. Roger. You got it, said Ramirez. And so we restructured the labyrinth right then and there. Following Adalman's exemplary performance, the dungeon had a new hierarchy. That took care of matters for now, so I was about to order Adalman out of the control room when the previously silent Diablo spoke up. We seem to be at the end of the conversation, so I have something I'd like to report to you. What's that? Well, my servant Rosen sent a magical call stating that he has something to urgently discuss with you. It seems his former instructor or the like called upon him, and now this man is asking for an audience with you, Sir Rimuru. His name is Ghidorah. Never heard of him. Report. He is listed as the author of a number of books on sorcery. Oh, he's famous, huh? I thought Rosen was a pretty well-known and talented sorcerer himself, but his master must be even more so, huh? Kinda interesting. I wouldn't mind meeting him, but wouldn't that be a trap, though? We're on the eve of duking it out with the Empire, so a meeting at this point seems really suspicious, I think. Exactly. There is no need at all for you to meet with such a dubious person, Sir Rimuru. Xion was even more doubtful than I was, and I could see why. Given the times we lived in, if my personal guardian wanted to keep me away from danger, well, she was just doing her job. I wasn't nearly as wary as her, so I figured it was better to listen to my advisors for matters like these. Indeed. I see no need to lend an ear to the opinions of someone on the level of Rosen. In fact, I hardly even need to listen to him at all. Diablo made this sound like an accepted fact, but I was sure he just wanted to be excused from all this. Regardless, if both of my personal secretaries were advising me against it, I was ready to call this off, but then I noticed Adalman fidgeting a bit. Yeah, I understood how he felt. Sometimes, Just when you're about to leave your boss's office, a phone call or unexpected visitor comes along. You don't want to interfere, but you don't want to just walk out on the boss, either, so you're stuck there, helplessly watching the clock tick away. Or is it just me? Regardless. Sorry, Adalman. That's all I needed from you, so you guys can leave. No, my lord. There is no need to be concerned about us. But apart from that. To tell the truth, Yes? This man, Ghidorah, that you speak of. I believe this may perhaps be a friend of mine. Huh? I turned my eyes to Adalman. He was shifting a bit in his seat, looking flustered. I almost wanted to say no, Adalman, you're allowed to have friends. I don't think you've betrayed me. So I asked Diablo to hold his opinion for now while Adalman gave me more details. He and Ghidorah, as he put it, were close friends over 1,000 years ago. I figured he'd have to be long dead in that case, but Ghidorah was a master-level wizard, so it wouldn't be unheard of if he wove his own magic to extend his life. After all, this was the very man who cast reincarnation on Adalman to save him. Adalman also recognized the name Rosin. As he recalled, he was one of Ghidorah's primary apprentices. We kept discussing them for a while, and as we did, it was increasingly clear this Ghidorah wanting to see me was the exact same guy. Diablo? Understood. I will arrange a date and time. Such a talented secretary. All I had to do was call his name, and he instantly recognized my intentions. My not-so-talented other secretary had no objections, so I decided to go ahead and give Ghidorah a tryout. With their defeat on floor 60, Shinji's party got to experience returning from death for the very first time. They woke up to find a large audience thanking them, cheering them, booing them, even reassuring them that they couldn't have avoided that loss. Their battles in the labyrinth were broadcast live, and Shinji's conquest was turning into a popular diversion. Dungeon challengers, of course, had the right to turn down any recording or broadcast of their exploits. It was a purely optional contract to sign, but Shinji had 2 reasons to go through with it. 1, they got a cut of the broadcast fees, and 2, they figured becoming famous would help keep them safe. They were in enemy territory, so if they became known names, it'd be that much harder for someone to assassinate them, and since the contract only allowed their boss fights to be broadcast, they didn't have to be on edge the entire time. It looked like the contract would be pretty lucrative for them, besides, so Shinji had no reason to turn it down. The same was true for his companions, so Shinji signed on the dotted line, and the result was this huge crowd greeting them now. Boy, that was too bad. Hope you train up a little more and try again. Man, those guys never stood a chance. What kind of monsters were those anyway? He swung that sword like it was a twig, and what about that skeleton on the throne? Some kinda legendary monster? It was probably a White King. The earth-shattering ruler of the dead. Not even an archdemon could take him. Whoa, so was that dragon alive or not, though? It didn't look like a statue or anything, but if it could have joined the battle, too, I don't think any human being had a chance in there. The questions came hard and fast from the audience. Shinji's party just smiled and waved as they found their way out of there. Well, I'm gonna keep my eye on you heroes. You're all gonna be in the record books alongside Sir Masayuki now. If you wanna beat that boss, you better find a way quick while Sir Masayuki's preparing for the war. Yeah, I got money down on you guys doing it, so keep it up. The voices remained just as loud behind their backs as they retired to their inn. Once they reached their room, the 3 of them flopped down on their beds. So now what are we gonna do? Mark asked. Who cares? An utterly exhausted Shinji replied. Just let me rest a bit. They put everything they had into that boss battle, but it made everything up to floor 59 look like preschool. On floor 60, even the non-boss adversaries worked with a clear command structure. The sentient Death Lord they encountered led a team of fighters into battle. They managed to beat him and make it to the boss chamber, but what ensued in there was just wretched. You gonna report back to Yuki? Zen's reminder made Shinji get up. He sat down on the bed, sighing, as Mark and Zen picked themselves up and sat around him. I don't really know what we can report. We had no idea that SideQuest Zone was gonna be so hard. Yeah, it wasn't too bad up to floor 59, but what the hell was up with 60? A Death Lord with a whole platoon of Death Knights, like, they had a whole army loaded up for us in there. Any normal soldier would have had his ass kicked in the blink of an eye. I know. That was awful. Everything got so well defended on that floor. And those three bosses, not just the knight who beat us, but the skeleton on the throne and the dragon. Those had to be secret bosses, I think. Now they were lost in conversation, too excited to worry too much about each other. The easy-breezy atmosphere up to yesterday had disappeared in under 24 hours, and that boss sitting on the throne. That was a White King, you know. I guess someone with high-level appraisal magic managed to identify it, but it's so different from how it looks on screen. 100%, Mark said in agreement with Shinji. Having that show up when we were totally unprepared for it. How could we even deal? Honestly, I never want to see it again. Zen's companions were on the same page. And the White King didn't even participate in the battle. It didn't move from the throne, just sat there, exuding royal dignity. I mean, that Minotaur guy seemed like a regular boss, you know? He was around an A in strength. But wasn't floor 60 way too much of a step up? Yeah. Too much. I'm starting to think everything up to floor 50 was meant to put us off our guard. But now I'm really sure of it, avowed Shinji. If monsters that strong are protecting it, there's got to be something in that maze. Yeah. That Alberto guy was just way out of our league. Even his equipment. I tried appraising it while Mark engaged him, but it was all unique from head to toe. That explains it. I came in figuring my Minos Bardiche could cleave right through all that. I guess weapons you pick up from treasure chests work well on the next boss only in RPGs, huh? Well, yeah. I think we got too full of ourselves in there. Yeah. They looked at each other and heaved a sigh in unison. Now they were a bit calmer. It was time for some tea and a moment to catch their breath. Wanna try again tomorrow? Are you serious? Not against them. We'd lose every time. Yeah. Also, that hero talk. Yuki mentioned Masayuki to us before, right? Like, that kid who has incredible good luck and nothing else? And he took on floor 60? I don't think he has yet, no. His party advanced down pretty easily as well, but they say he's never died yet in there. Oh. Has any other party tried it? The chatter I heard said the top runners are all tackling floor 50 at the moment, but none of them signed broadcast deals, so until now, Masayuki had the best public record. Beyond that, there's a few broadcasting parties stuck on floor 40. Signing a contract didn't mean you were watched inside the dungeon at all times. The cameras were only situated in the boss rooms every 10 floors, and occasionally camera crews would follow you around for special events and so on. Thus, thanks to being the first team to floor 60, Shinji's party became the big celebrities of the moment, and with the way they kept rewriting records, people were starting to place bets on them. You know, I'm willing to bet Masayuki got tipped off. He probably knows floor 60's home to a secret boss. I guess we shoulda expected to lose, then. Like, 2 guys at that level, plus a dragon. This labyrinth is so unbalanced. It was pretty well balanced until floor 50. I really do think that was meant as a hidden boss. The hidden town's probably right past that. So they continued talking and consoling themselves for a while, before moving on to their future plans. You know, guys, if we've got crowds cheering for us in this city, I don't think we can really do any kinda spy work. Nah, that's not a big problem. Like I said, we're safer this way. All we've done is go into the labyrinth so far. So should we wait for Lord Ghidorah to show up? Because I think we hit a pretty big dead end down there. Or, Mark said with a grin, you wanna try training or something? Shinji chuckled. Well, there's definitely something past that chamber, and the Guardian's way stronger than anything else we saw. I think I can report that much to Yuki. Tell him how big the labyrinth is, too. It must have been magically expanded or something, because it's way too large and deep to be man-made. And don't forget, he was far stronger than anything on any other floor. Shinji meekly nodded at Mark and Zen. Right. Okay, once I'm done with my report, you guys want to tour around some more? There was no need to spend any more time talking about it. The three of them mentally flipped the page as they went out into the night. Their first stop was a secluded spot outside of town, where they made their report as agreed upon. After sending the summary report to Yuki, they received a magical call from him about 10 minutes later. Hey! Glad you're doing okay. Well, we were until last night, but today was awful for us. Ha ha ha. Yeah, sounds like you guys got your asses kicked. So what are you up to next? I think it'll depend on Lord Ghidorah. We've got no way to pass floor 60 by ourselves, and the labyrinth's not really set up so we can sneak our way around it. Yeah, I'm sure. All right. Now, let me ask you something else. Yes? Can you go into more detail on just how strong the floor 60 boss is? Just, like, anything you felt in there is fine. Only Shinji and his friends understood the angle of this question. What Yuki asked, basically, was how high up in the Imperial Guardians this opponent would be. Shinji thought it over a moment. The Imperial Army's ranking duels held little interest to him. He didn't care much about working his way up the military ranks, so he had never tried challenging anyone before. He owed Yuki for picking him up and taking care of him, so he just served him as a way to pay back the debt. In the military, though, since he didn't like lending a hand to organized crime. The moment Yuki began leading the composite division, he transferred over there from his original assignment in the armored division. He wasn't the only other-worlder in the East to think along these lines, either. Quite a few of them avoided making shows out of their power, dodging major responsibilities and just living normal lives. That made it harder to accurately gauge their strength, so nobody could really say whether the Imperial Knights were truly the strongest or not. They were by name, at least, and in a way, it was natural that they were ranked on such a detailed basis. I'd say he'd at least make it into the top 50. I don't think anyone lower than that would stand a chance. Are you talking about Alberto alone? Yes. Oh, and I dunno if this helps, but I was deployed as an army medic for an anti-archdemon mission once. I only got a quick look at that fight, but the White King I saw today had pretty much the same magicule count, I think. Do you mean the Crimson Shore disaster? Oh, yeah. Roger. Okay, thanks for the guidance. You guys can go on R and R until you regroup with Lord Ghidorah. With that, the magical call ended. The Crimson Shore disaster was considered among the most ignoble events to ever occur on Imperial soil. It had its origins in a beautiful lakeside province that rebelled against the Empire and declared independence. They were at a military disadvantage, of course, but what their king did to make up the difference wound up triggering a catastrophe. He had tapped into secret demon summoning arts, an all but forbidden taboo. His orders were to summon the most powerful demon they could manage, and his court sorcerers did his bidding. The archdemon they summoned wound up laying waste to the entire province. This was a small province, its total population less than 10,000, and it had no chance of outgunning the Empire, but the king still had good reason to go rogue. His only daughter, the princess of the realm, was being claimed by an imperial noble as his concubine. With the empire being as vast as it was, the emperor didn't waste his time in the nitty-gritty dealings of the tinier provinces. All imperial territory belonged to him, its management left to the nobility, and so nobles had free rein to treat the provinces as they pleased. It was thus common to see a frontier earl use the emperor's authority to act like a brutal tyrant over the region he ruled. What the demon wanted, however, was the Splinter Kingdom's princess. The king steadfastly denied this request, but once his head sorcerer caught sight of the demon's full glory, He went mad, his spirit crushed forever, and he agreed to the demand. Thus, with an evil smile, the demon possessed the princess's body. The king was enraged, but that rage was soon replaced with terror, for once the demon had a body, that was when the massacre began. When the empire was informed that the province was leveled, they decided to send out a force to subdue this demon. They were fortunate they did, for if they had acted any later, it could have been the birth of a second Guy Crimson. This force arrived to find the beautiful lake turned a deep shade of red, dyed by the blood of the province's citizens. It was a black mark on the history of the empire, the worst thing to happen to it in centuries. It was ultimately the Armored Division, its bases located across the empire, who put an end to the Crimson Shores incident. That's what the history books said. But the truth, as Shinji was witness to from far away, was that a small group of soldiers defeated the archdemon all by themselves. The whole affair struck Shinji as fishy, really. Clearly, the nobility was oppressing the countryside, but once the demon aimed its terror at the empire's own citizens, Shinji began to wonder if the truth was as cut and dried as reported. For one, the empire reacted almost too quickly. In the time it'd take to report the incident to the imperial mainland, debate over countermeasures, and form an expeditionary force, the demon could have easily completed its full manifestation. Instead, the empire stopped this just in the nick of time, thus proving, in Shinji's mind anyway, that they were tipped off in advance. He had no intention of telling anyone else about this. When he saw the strength of the demon his deployment was fighting, it taught him that some things were better off left unexplored in his life. I have to imagine those guys had to be at the top of the Imperial Knights. No matter what he did, Shinji doubted he'd ever have a chance against them. It truly felt like they belonged to some other world, and that's when he stopped caring about his army rank. Shinji breathed a sigh of relief as Mark and Zen eyed him carefully. "You done?" asked Mark. "Thanks for handling that," said Zen. "Sure. I think that about covers it. Now we get to chill out until Lord Ghidorah shows." "All right. But damn, you survived Crimson Shore? Good thing you did." "Yeah. By playing possum. One of the better decisions I made in my life, I think." "Oh hell, you deserve a medal just for making it out. Didn't like 2/3 of that force get killed off?" "That's right. I never want to join anything like that again. I mean, I was an army medic, and I couldn't even do anything." "Oh? Yeah, every attack killed its targets instantly, so healing didn't matter. That's why I bugged out real early on." "Wow. That sounds rough. Archdemons are really that bad?" "Well, the one I saw was beyond bad. And plus, I swear we made eye contact once, but if you ask me, I think she let me go. Her eyes were, like, blood red. Just remembering it makes me wanna piss my pants." Shinji gave his surprised-looking audience a smile. "But if that skeleton's on the level of an archdemon like that, there's no way we can take him." "It's really on the same level?" "The magicule counts are anyway. They say that the longer a demon's existed, the stronger they are, and I think the one I saw was pretty old. It had to be, or else the highest echelons of imperial government wouldn't have taken such drastic action," but Shinji stopped himself from saying that. "But there's no point dwelling on it. I heard they're working on a machine that can tabulate the power of your adversary, but I don't really see the point. Even that knight Alberto, based on his magicules, I can't even imagine how strong he is. And do you remember back in our classes? How good you were in a fight involved a lot more than just how strong you were." "Right. I get what you're saying. Yeah. That sort of thing? Some demons are just beyond anything we can measure. That's all I want you to remember." The way Shinji put it, they couldn't even begin to work on that level. The other two took that to heart. With the worst of the day behind them, the trio hurried over to the Free Guild office before it closed and sold their magic crystals and extra equipment to the resource department. "Whoa, these crystals are from really deep down, aren't they? The quality's completely different." "Another slotted weapon?" And pure magisteel? They'd never let these out in public in other countries. The guild staff members were pretty impressed. Shinji's party could have fetched higher prices if they shopped around, but they were here on an undercover investigation, so they didn't want to expand their social network that much. Besides, the guild paid well enough. Their mission was at a standstill, but the past few days alone ensured they were damn well funded, at least. In the army, they were paid an annual salary, all in advance. If you got promoted in rank, you'd receive the difference in salary the following year. Even if you were penniless upon enlistment, you'd get a reserve fund based on how many days remained in the year. Thus you really couldn't lose money in the military. Even if you died in combat, the advance salary would be treated as part of your family's consolation payout. Foot soldiers ranked up to private received a base salary of around 10 gold coins, equivalent to approximately $10,000 a year. The army covered your room, board, and clothing, so this pay was still a blessing for the lower classes. To this, enlisted men could add rank pay, hazard pay, and a lot of other side bonuses, depending on their duties. Mark and Zen were both first lieutenants, while Shinji was a major with a medic qualification. None of them had the authority to give orders, but their rank still afforded them a few nice perks. Otherworlders, in general, were treated well in the Empire, at least on the level of a second lieutenant, but Shinji was ranked higher than his companions. Regardless, though, all of them were on a much higher pay scale than rank-and-file infantry. A first lieutenant's rank earned them 36 gold coins, while a major netted 44. Every rank promotion meant an extra 4 golds a year. Combined with the base pay and other income, Mark's and Zen's yearly salaries were around 50 golds, while Shinji's usually broke 70. A military salary gave you an income above the imperial average, but you still weren't living like a tycoon. You'd be rich by rural standards, but in the capital, the cost of living was sky high. Still, life could be tough in this world if you decided to go it by yourself. Having a stable career, whether in the military or elsewhere, was a godsend. Now, though, this trio knew better. They didn't need to cling to the army at all. They could just live in that city within the labyrinth, and they'd be just fine. Their confidence chiefly stemmed from the fact that today's trip to the guild alone earned them over 300 gold coins. That well outpaced what a year in the army would earn them all combined. That, and unless the Empire handed it out to them, they'd never have a chance at scoring unique class equipment in their lives. It was a huge windfall. All three of them realized this well enough, but all three hesitated to say it out loud. They kept their silence as they headed to their next destination. Once in Rimuru, the monster city, they chose a fairly high-end restaurant for dinner, enjoying the kind of luxury they hadn't experienced in ages. "Is this really okay?" Zen timidly asked. "Selling equipment like that?" Shinji and Mark were unmoved. "Of course it is. We didn't sell all of it. We kept some samples." "Yeah, and it's not like we can take it all home anyway. As long as we keep the good stuff, nobody's gonna complain." Unless they received permission to loot it, anything procured during a military operation belonged to the armed forces. In this case, none of them would have any right to protest if everything they earned was taken away. At the same time, though, they were asked to investigate the labyrinth. They were posing as adventurers, and selling booty on the market was perfectly normal adventurer behavior. It seemed safe to take this as a nice side benefit. Besides, it's not like Yuki would demand this stuff from them anyway. He was bound to let Shinji's party have it all, except for what he personally needed. "But you know, if they do confiscate all the money we've made, you gotta start seriously thinking about moving here, don't ya?" Shinji finally said it first. Nobody disagreed. 1 gold coin is equivalent to around $1,000, a ballpark conversion that applied just as well in the Empire as it did here. Minted in the Dwarven Kingdom, they circulated around the world, and the Empire recognized them as official currency. Whatever they earned here, they could bring home and use like any other money. "I think that's totally doable." "Yeah. I was just joking about it earlier, but now I feel like working here would be a lot more fun." Shinji only half meant it, but Mark and Zen were more up for it than he anticipated. Yes, the empire was on the cutting edge of culture and technology. It boasted a fine capital, the food was good, and they lived comfortably. As long as they had money, they could enjoy life well enough, even compared with their former world. But they were in the military, and that always came with the potential for death. Meanwhile, the dungeon offered everything they could possibly want. You never worried about dying, something they didn't quite believe at first, but now that they'd experienced it once, they were convinced. And if death wasn't a concern, wouldn't it be better to just earn what they could in there and party it up in town? That was the conclusion Shinji and his friends made, and no one could blame them for it. Money, of course, was meaningless without entertainment, something the monster city of Rimuru offered lots of. There was a battle arena open to the public when events weren't taking place, giving citizens a nice, well-maintained space to play and relax. Sports like soccer and baseball were starting to spread, and some of the dungeon runners were forming teams. And then there were the hot springs, and the theaters, which housed a flourishing drama scene that played to big crowds on a regular basis, something they already witnessed for themselves. The food was just as good, no, even better than the Empire's, featuring familiar Japanese specialties, desserts, and a dizzying range of adult beverages. They were recreating cuisines that didn't even exist in this realm, and an Earth native like Shinji found it all hopelessly attractive. Plus, when you really got down to it, their only obligation was to Yuki, and Yuki didn't look like he wanted conflict with the demon Lord Rimuru. It didn't even seem like they'd be betraying anyone if they moved here. I know desertion gets us the death penalty. But we're not at war, are we? Not yet anyway. Right? I was just thinking about that, too, Shinji. 'Cause we can still request a discharge, yeah? That'll depend on Yuki. Desertion was a crime only when the nation was in a state of war. That didn't apply at the moment, luckily. Depending on how you interpreted this, an honorable discharge still seemed possible. But the problem, muttered Mark, is this war. That was the whole reason they couldn't commit to abandoning the Empire. War was obviously looming on the horizon, ready to rise up on them, and it'd leave its scars across this entire region. If it weren't for that, they'd be house hunting right now. Who do you think's gonna win? Before that, if we're ordered to attack this city, what are we gonna do? The trio exchanged glances. It was an excellent dinner, but suddenly it tasted bland to them. Attacking the city was the last thing they wanted, in a couple of ways. Shinji's group had stayed here only a little while, but they really liked it. They'd hate it if this city got wiped off the map. That was one reason. The second, as their imaginations ominously suggested, was that if the labyrinth bosses were any indication, the strongest of Tempestian fighters had to be absolute beasts. I mean, of course they're gonna have someone really strong defending their important facilities, right? Said Mark. But their troops have to be weaker than that. Or I guess we hope they are, huh? I agree, Shinji replied with a nod. I think once you get to the level of Rimuru, at least, it's a whole other ball game. There's a story about how Veldora raised an entire city long ago, and now I really don't think that's a joke at all. I mean, that White King could do it, even. The monsters who called Tempest home certainly seemed capable of disasters like that. You know, the way I see it, archdemons are kind of like nuclear weapons back home. They've got nuclear magic here, even. Yeah. 'Cause we've seen how war is all about numbers, but with a boss like that, all the numbers in the world wouldn't do a thing. You'd need dozens of fighters as good as us to stand a chance. All of them scowled, and the magical call from Ghidorah came shortly afterward. An elderly man was prostrated before me. Behind him, the trio I had been watching on the control room's big screen were following his lead. The man's name was Ghidorah, the very one who went through Diablo and Rosen to request an audience with me. He wasn't gaudily dressed, but he had an expensive-looking magic robe on, his eyes sharp enough that I doubted his age a little. Shinji, as I surmised, was actually named Shinji Tonomura, to be exact. The other two put their real names on the processing form. All three were apparently assigned to Ghidorah here, a master sorcerer. They usually worked under Yuki but were serving as assistants to Ghidorah in their current investigations. They had explained all this to me, and after Ghidorah was done, he took this pose, Shinji and the gang copying him. We weren't gonna get anywhere like this. Yeah, that's about what I figured with you guys, I guess. But we can't really get comfortable and talk if you're posing like that, okay? Let's move somewhere else. Shion nodded. Lift your heads, she intoned, sounding grumpy for some reason. This is why I hate royal audiences like this. I know I'm gonna mess up my manners somehow. I'd prefer to just skip the whole thing. As you wish. Given all that exaggerated shouting, I was starting to dread our meeting. So we relocated to a reception room, a plainer one. I tended to prefer this one. Over in the fancier chamber, the furniture and stuff were so high-end that I was afraid I'd break or ruin something. One false move with a full teacup, and it'd be liable to stain the fancy carpet we had in there. In my heart, I was still just another common peon, and I preferred surroundings within my means. It appeared Shinji's party was the same way. They looked a bit more cheerful than before. Which do you like more? I casually asked, tea or coffee? Coffee, please. Shinji, Ghidorah shouted. I spent a few moments calming him down. And you, Ghidorah? Me? Well, I'll have what Shinji's having. Oh? Don't they have coffee in the Empire? I figured they would, but maybe there's not that much in circulation. Turning toward Mark and Zen, they simply nodded back at me. They were okay with the same thing, I supposed. Okay, 4 American blends, Shuna. American? Ghidorah yelped. Oh, did you want something stronger? Dark roast, maybe? Or you wanna try it Tempest style? No, I didn't mean it like that, but... Oh. Saraimoru, would you happen to be an otherworlder? Yeah? That's the question he has? Because if so, he clearly hasn't done his homework. I sized the 4 of them up, but only Ghidorah had an oh crap look on his face. I guess the other 3 knew but forgot to tell him. Well. Now, how about we get down to business? Shuna laid out the coffee cups on the table, along with enough milk and sugar for everyone. Leaving Shinji and his friends to watch in wonder at this, I decided to address Ghidorah first. He gave Shinji a spiteful look after he exclaimed, "Oh, this coffee's really good." But I was kind enough to overlook this. Well, to tell you the truth, I am something of a veteran reincarnate as well. Lord Ghidorah certainly kicked things off with a bombshell. The other 3 turned toward him, looking just as surprised. Apparently Ghidorah, in his mission to master the magical arts, had reincarnated himself many times over an untold number of years. With every rebirth, he'd read through the secret libraries of this or that royal palace, allowing him to build a vast store of knowledge. He came to know Adalman in the midst of this clandestine sorcery research, and the two became close friends. As I mentioned earlier, I had a personal vendetta against the Western Holy Church, one I kindled after my best friend Adalman was killed. Thus, over the course of centuries, I crafted my plans and coaxed the Empire into doing my bidding. Ghidorah gave me his personal history. After Adalman was put into a trap, he swore revenge, headed into the Empire alone, and gradually built up his reputation. He had experienced battle against Veldora as well. Certainly, he'd led a far more eventful life than I thought. In hindsight, I'm honestly glad I completed my reincarnation ritual before we challenged him. I always wanted to see for myself the ultimate in evil, the worst nature could create. Only 4 true dragons had ever been born. They sat at the precipice of monsterdom, the most powerful beings on the planet. Based on his experience battling one of them, he didn't think the Imperial army was likely to ever beat Veldora. He was, of course, saying this right in front of the guy, who was already shooting me gleeful sidelong glances. I wish he'd stop. Yeah, it's amazing and all, but it's not like I was obliged to keep praising him over it. I do think, mind you, that we could have scored a tactical victory against Sir Veldora. But those fools in the Empire insisted on trying to win that beast over to our side. I warned them, time and time again, that it was an impossible waste of time. Ghidorah's interests were fixed squarely upon the West and his revenge against Luminism, and he didn't want to waste good soldiers on pointless campaigns. He attempted to prevail upon his superiors how unrealistic their hopes were, but the commanders refused to listen, overvaluing themselves far too much. Hearing all this, Ghidorah sounded like a pretty stand-up guy. But Ghidorah was also the one who found the Empire's lust for expansion, it seemed. I asked him to spare me all the details and skipped to more recent trends. So for the most part, the Empire's trying to start a war because of you. That's part of it, you could say. No, old man, you can try talking your way around it, but you had to be the cause. He quickly began making excuses, perhaps sensing my displeasure, but no. The Empire has always had that will to dominate, you see. If I didn't give that lust for power a direction, they would have fanned the flames of war all over the world. All I did was turn their eyes toward the West. Their goals matched with mine, you could say. It was a good arrangement, I thought. Oh, like hell it was. And now we're mixed up in it for no reason. And let me tell you, I was against invading the forest of Jura. It is the domain of Sir Veldora, the Storm Dragon, and I didn't want to repeat our mistakes from before. I suggested they devote their efforts towards scheming against the Dwarven Kingdom instead, but they can be so stubborn, all of them. They try to use military might to solve all their problems. Ghidorah sounded pained about it. I didn't care. Wait a minute. So the Empire does want to hit the Dwarven Kingdom? I had pretty much discounted it. But did we need to consider a campaign route through Dworgen after all? You thought about that, too? Well, it's nothing as concrete as wanting to hit them, exactly. My suggestion was to propose an alliance with King Garzel, so he'd allow us to march through the kingdom. My only grudge was with the Western Holy Church, remember? The old sorcerer was already aware that Adalman was safe. They would be meeting after our talk was done, and that's why Ghidorah, realizing just how badly he whiffed on all of this, had switched to an anti-war stance. He was on friendly terms with the Emperor, he claimed, but not even he could ask him to withdraw their military plans. Instead, he kept pleading his case against the war in subsequent government-level meetings. This attitude seemed a little too convenient for my tastes, but if Ghidorah could help us avoid war, I was willing to bite my tongue. Either way, I wanted to get as much out of him as I could right now. As I did, Benimaru and my other officers were in the next room over, listening in and holding their own strategic conference. My job was to make Ghidorah as comfortable, and loose-lipped, as possible. I imagine King Garzel turned you down, huh? As one would expect, I suppose, some of our commanders considered an assassination attempt, but I spoke up against that. If we were prepared to do that, I said, we may as well crush them with an all-out assault. It didn't strike me as anything to be proud of. He was more of a warmonger than I thought. I rolled my eyes a bit but kept extracting more info from him. The Empire's military structure, the thoughts of their leading officers, even the astonishing news that Yuki was planning a coup. All this assured me that I was getting pretty much everything Ghidorah could provide. Finally, seemingly at ease, Ghidorah opened up to me. Let me assure you, Sir Raimaru, that I bear no particular sense of duty toward the Empire. They broke up the army division I personally built from scratch and took all my men away from me. This group with me, Shinji, Mark, and Zen, are my personal apprentices, so I'm allowed to turn to them as needed. But in the end, if Adalman is alive and well, or well, at least, then I have no attachment left to the Empire. He was an egocentric, self-centered old man, not a shred of loyalty in his heart, and he wasn't afraid to admit it. I had to hand it to him. I wasn't about to say it out loud, but I kind of respected that attitude. So with that in mind, Sir Raimaru, if I may have the honor of joining your cause, I am ready to exert myself as best as I can. Right after admitting his utter lack of loyalty, he was courageous enough to ask for a spot in my administration. I got to admit, I liked the guy. But Benimaru and some others were in the next room hearing all this. I could already picture them losing their temper over Ghidorah's attitude. It was gonna be hard to calm them down later. Still, that didn't stop me from bringing Ghidorah on as a guest advisor, albeit on a probationary basis. If he wanted to join me, I'd make him work for the right. He certainly wasn't gonna be too loyal to me, but I'd see how he could pitch in. For now, I was okay with him meeting a Dalman and using a transport spell to access Floor 70. His knowledge could help us out a lot, maybe he could assist Ramirez. But before he settled down in Tempest, I planned to have him return to the Empire and do a little job for me. As for Shinji and company, I'd allow them to remain here in Tempest. They told me they'd take it easy for a while as they figured out what they wanted to do. This was their request, made under Ghidorah's advice, and I had no reason to turn it down. If they turned traitor, I could always banish them, but I guess they really didn't want that, because they readily pledged their loyalty to me. However, they also professed a great respect for Yuki and asked not to be involved in any hostilities against him. I was okay with that. Really, I said, the relationship between us and Yuki's people is so complicated. We kinda have a truce for the moment, is the way I'd put it. He's pissed me off a lot, and I'd like to get back at him, honestly, but I can't really will myself to hate his guts, either. Despite it all, Yuki was still Shizu's student, and whenever I recalled how happy Shizu seemed when she talked about him, I couldn't help but cut the guy some slack. Maybe I was too soft on him, but hey, we're fellow countrymen. There'd be no more second chances, but for now, I'd put our past history on ice. If you asked me to trust him, however, that was another story. Trusting that bastard at this point was nothing but a death wish. And you know, guys, I don't think you should trust Yuki too much, either. Ghidorah nodded at this, interestingly enough. Guess he had his own thoughts about Yuki, too. They were acquaintances and partners at one point, so maybe Ghidorah could be a good go-between for us. I was starting to think recruiting him was a pretty smart idea. If he didn't excessively trust Yuki, either, I could at least believe him on that point. Later, I reunited Ghidorah with Adalman, the two of them fondly reminiscing. Adalman consented to take him in, so for the time being, I'd let them live together. But before he did, now that I had all the info I wanted from Ghidorah, I ordered him to return to the Empire and follow my instructions. First, he'd advocate against the war for me. You think you can do that? By all means, Sir Rimuru. I am used to behind-the-scenes maneuvering, trust me. I'm sure he was. But normally, it'd be impossible for a single person to stop the will of an entire state. It's not that I didn't believe Ghidorah, but I figured it best to give him a plan B as well. If you can stop the war, that'd be best, but from what I'm hearing, that sounds like an uphill battle. You said the Empire's got an expansionist streak, right? If they're on the move, we can't really stop them now. But. So if that winds up not working out, I want you to point 'em at this labyrinth. How do you mean? In the labyrinth, we could take all the casualties in the world and still not have a problem. That led me to this idea. I see. So you'd use the labyrinth to chip away at the Imperial forces and break their morale? Pretty much. And I'm sure Yuki's gonna use that opportunity to act as well. If he starts a riot back home, the Empire can't really keep a war going, can they? I wasn't sure how well it'd all work out, but in the labyrinth, at least, we were guaranteed not to lose anyone. I explained all this to Ghidorah, giving him some labyrinth equipment and 3 resurrection bracelets. He could use this, I figured, to sell the dungeon to the commanders for us. No army wanted to be attacked from the rear. I doubted they were going to ignore the labyrinth and march on to the west, but if we could dangle some rewards in front of their eyes. Ah, I understand. A very astute way of thinking, and I know a few commanders greedy enough to take the bait. I think you can expect results from this scheme, Sir Rimuru. So Ghidorah accepted it with full confidence. If possible, we'd stop the war. If not, we'd divert them into the labyrinth. The rest was up to him. Thus I granted Ghidorah and his 3 apprentices asylum, and with these new, unexpected allies, the incident came to a close. Chapter 4. The Empire makes its move. The Empire had a mystery man among its ranks. His name was Tatsuya Kondo, an otherworlder who knew everything there was to know about the Imperial Underground. He was the Imperial capital's darkness itself. Tatsuya kept his black hair short and tidy, his bangs flowing gently down toward his eyes, and he had a relaxed, if well-honed, manner of carrying himself. On the surface, he seemed like a nice young man, still in his early 20s. But on the inside, he was cold and calculating, eyes glinting from his barren face. They seemed sharp enough to see through anyone they looked at, not friendly, but clever and cunning. It was only to be expected, for First Lieutenant Kondo wasn't at all the age he seemed. Here in the Imperial capital, otherworlders were not too uncommon a sight. The Empire pledged to safeguard them, and they had been collected from all around the world. Tatsuya was one such person rescued by this plan, and it entirely had to do with the magic that existed in this realm. Over 70 years ago, Tatsuya risked his life for the sake of his country and served in a special military operation, a kamikaze squadron ordered to strike enemy naval fleets. Tatsuya had no comment on the need for this mission. Looking back on how things were those days, all he thought was, well, there was nothing else he could do. He just looked back at the men who lived and died serving under him and hoped he could find some kind of meaning in their actions. Even now, he never forgot about them. And to make sure of that, so he could continue living with the memory of his comrades, he retained the same rank of first lieutenant that he held back then. So Tatsuya had headed off to his death, but with a flash of explosive heat and light, he instead found himself in another world. He felt death at arm's length, but rather he survived. It was the Emperor himself who saved Tatsuya. Luck was on Tatsuya's side that day. He appeared in a garden accessible by only the Emperor and a few close associates. The Emperor happened to be relaxing there that very moment. How interesting, Tatsuya heard a voice say. Perhaps this is fate at work. Then he passed out, and when he woke up, he was completely intact, not a scratch on him. His luck had saved his life, the same life he'd once abandoned, which he now swore to use to repay the Emperor's kindness. All the powers he awoke to after his journey across worlds, and his brush with death, he gave to the Emperor. That remained true to this very day. He never appeared on the public stage. He never aged, looking exactly as he did back then. And there, in the Imperial Intelligence Office nestled in the capital's shadow, deep in the Empire's darkness, he could be found. A mysterious figure stalking the halls of information, a man hidden behind the Empire's shadow. A human, a wrangler of evil. Tatsuya Kondo went by many monikers. He was the head of the Imperial Information Bureau, and he was feared as a question mark, one not even the commander of each division could ignore. The IIB had picked up information that Ghidorah sent a team led by Shinji to conquer the dungeon. Ah. I see. Good work. First Lieutenant Kondo was a quiet man. He said no more than that. His informant, used to this treatment, saluted and left. Kondo was never one to state his thoughts to others. The report submitted to him contained detailed information on Yuki's men. Over 1,000 otherworlders had been collected from around the world. A little under a tenth of them had awoken to 0 unique skills. These men and women were set up in the imperial capital and allowed to live their lives in peace. A little over a tenth had battle-oriented unique skills. They numbered over 100, and each was assigned to the division that best suited their abilities. The rest were referred to non-military professions based on their skill set, finding useful work in a vast variety of professions. Right then, the problem was that the otherworlders awakened to battle skills. Yuki Kagurazuka was the founder of the Free Guild in the Western nations, serving as Grand Master until a year ago, and he harnessed that power to rescue otherworlders. That, at least, was how Yuki described himself, but the IIB already knew that was a lie. Trends indicated that he had grown friendly with the Rotso family, taking advantage of their influence. The IRB knew that the West was proceeding with an illicit, forbidden summoning program that had led to large numbers of otherworlders in their lands. There was no other explanation for why they had so many battle-oriented ones in their possession. Through the use of a locking curse, it was also possible to force the summoned into an irreversible oath of loyalty. These summons were the best way to build a team that was guaranteed never to betray you, and now those otherworlders were deployed in a variety of militaries. Kondo saw this as grave news. An imminent danger. He had consummate perception skills and an intuition that was truly fearsome. And Kondo was right to be concerned. The results were revealed in this report, based on his words and actions since moving to the Empire. The Imperial Information Bureau believed there was a high probability that Yuki was going to launch a coup attempt. They also had a list of the people Yuki had tapped for the effort. Based on his achievements, the Empire had accepted his request for asylum, but he didn't seem to appreciate it much. Instead, he did his own thing, working hard to expand his power and putting his hand-picked associates into each army division. Several of them had even been appointed Imperial Knights, one of the Empire's highest honors. The army division was one thing, but allowing traitors into the Imperial Guardians, the force built to protect His Majesty the Emperor, simply wasn't allowable. Kondo could no longer let this slide. This is dangerous, he decided. Yuki Kagurazuka, you are clearly someone who deserves to be eliminated. Now, however, was not the time to act. Lord Ghidorah, Master Sorcerer and one of the most powerful people in the Empire, was reportedly connected to Yuki. They had evidence to back up this report, but it was unclear just how deep this relationship was. Lord Ghidorah's importance to the Empire went without saying. Kondo doubted he'd turn traitor on a passing whim, but he also knew that he worked alongside the Empire chiefly because his goals matched the state's ideals. Perhaps, then, some trigger might put his goals in conflict with the Empire. If it ever does, that old man is just as dangerous. In which case? Yuki, and Ghidorah. Yuki looked like just a boy, but his actions indicated the touch of an experienced man. Like Kondo himself, he was too dangerous a subject to judge on looks alone. Ghidorah looked like an aged man, but he was much more than that, a living monster, really, having lived for over 1,000 years. Anyone who wanted to oppose him couldn't go in with a half-hearted approach. So it was time to gather information. They had evidence, but there still wasn't enough intel. For now, it was too early to move out in the open. He would carefully investigate each of Yuki's otherworlders and examine whether any had locking curses upon them. But if Yuki or Ghidorah made any suspicious moves, don't expect a public trial. First Lieutenant Kondo, the man hidden behind the Empire's shadow, would never give mercy to traitors. Dance on, won't you, for the sake of the Empire. Both of you are already in my hands. There, in the darkness of the Empire, Kondo softly whispered to himself, a cold light in his eyes. Inside an office with an ornate desk, a one-eyed man was seated in a luxuriant chair. A patch covered his left eye. He was skinny and appeared in his 40s. His name was Caligulio, and he was commander of the Armored Division, the most powerful force in the Empire. On the desk before him were several magic crystals, pure, high-quality examples, known sources of magical energy. With technology provided by Yuki, these crystals, taken from the cores of monsters, could be refined into magistones, turning them into a reliable, mass-produced magic source. Monsters would occasionally drop natural magistones, but these could only be collected from those ranked A and above, and having the huge magicule count to prove it. These natural magistones were unparalleled in quality, most often used as decoration or magic catalysts than for their content. Unless one had a steady supply of them, they were useless as an energy source. Caligulio reached out and grabbed a magic crystal from the desk. The more he observed it, the more he realized just how high quality it was. He put it back down, already missing the feeling of it in his hand, and picked up the report that came with these specimens. It was from their research lab. It stated that magic crystals of this quality could each produce 100 Empire-made magistones. They were pure enough to turn into energy as is, and naturally collecting crystals of this standard would require at least a B-rank monster. Damn you, Ghidorah. Keeping such a money-making opportunity under your hat. Caligulio was angry. He had paid off the researchers, telling them to inform him of any developments, and this report was the result. Ghidorah had only just brought in these magic crystals. He didn't say where they were collected, but based on their number, Caligulio surmised he stumbled across a monster nest. They were first-rate specimens, after all, and testing indicated they all contained around the same amount of energy. You couldn't see this consistency from harvesting different species at once. Some variants would be unavoidable, and you'd have to refine them into magistones for practicality's sake. No, these magic crystals were surprisingly similar in quality, indicating they all came from the same species of monster. Caligulio didn't expect to be able to tame these monsters, whatever they were, and raise them in captivity, but even regularly scheduled culls would help the Empire shore up its energy mix. However, it appeared things were far more complicated. Caligulio's face twisted into a longing grin. The report concluded that securing whatever hunting ground produced these magic crystals would put them a long way toward a steady energy supply. And they had more than a vague idea where these monsters lived. In fact, they had the exact spot, the heavily rumored dungeon, located within the demon lord Raimuru's domain. That damned old man's been giving too much attention to that kid Yuki. I hardly see him any longer. How dare he try to hoard this opportunity for himself? This was the origin of Caligulio's annoyance. And that wasn't all. A high-level noble he was on good terms with informed him of a rather interesting story. He, along with many of his kin, didn't bother hiding their glee when they told him that Ghidorah had gone off to investigate this dungeon, and lost 3 of his apprentices to it. This would normally elicit little more than a bit of sympathy, but what Ghidorah brought back was the problem. It turns out he didn't just come home with magic crystals, he brought treasure, too. Among them was a sword currently decorating Caligulio's office, a pristine example of magisteel make that clearly required great skill to forge. It was a truly excellent piece, one only the finest artisans of the Dwarven Kingdom were capable of. In fact, considering the metal's purity, it was even better than that. Nothing circulating within the empire compared. Caligulio had purchased this sword from his well-placed noble friend, part of a set of 3, one of which he already handed over to this division's technical department. The noble boasted about how it was a rare find, perhaps infused with some mysterious power, and he encouraged Caligulio to invest in them, even though Ghidorah had presented them to the noble at no charge. Caligulio asked why Ghidorah gave them away for free, and the noble demurred. "You know I can't tell you," he had bragged. So the commander paid a total of 300 gold coins, 100 per blade. Even he was curious about them, and after purchasing the set, the noble finally agreed to give him a few hints. Caligulio himself was from lower-level nobility, making it up to division commander exclusively through talent. Since the empire was a pure meritocracy, he technically outranked the upper-crust noble he got the swords from, since his title was based on birthright alone. Normally, he wouldn't give someone like Caligulio the time of day, but thanks to his rank, he had to at least feign politeness. "I'm sure he's still turning up his nose at me, but that doesn't matter. Right now, I need to figure out how to exploit them for all they've got." The upper nobility never took action unless they stood to gain something from it. None of them was soft enough to tell him anything out of the goodness of their hearts. No, there must have been some cold number crunching behind their reaching out and telling him about Ghidorah's findings. Essentially, they had put Caligulio and Yuki on opposite sides of the scale. I can't believe how utterly greedy those nobles are. But look at you, Ghidorah. How dare you lobby the nobility to send the composite division to capture the labyrinth? You could have recommended my division, but no. I can't believe he's still sore about me taking the armored division from him. The armored division had just completed a major modernization campaign, thanks to Ghidorah's support. Its head count had grown tens to hundreds of times over, but Ghidorah had absolutely no command over it. Caligulio was sure Ghidorah envied him for that. But fine. My noble informants were certainly a stroke of good luck. Now I can give them all the slip and claim this prize for my force. Winning over the upper crust nobility, of course, came at a price. If Caligulio did claim that prize, a decent percentage of it would have to go into their pockets. But he still didn't think it was a bad deal. This labyrinth produces more than just magic crystals. This sword is simply excellent, rare class now, maybe unique class in 100 years. Even faster, perhaps, given how much magisteel they used. This alone proves how valuable the labyrinth would be in my hands. That was why Caligulio went through the effort of winning over the nobles. Now he was thinking about how he'd continue to fund this effort, going forward, but in the back of his mind, there was one nagging doubt. But what could that slot be for anyway? The well-placed noble mentioned a mysterious power, and he was sure that was straight from Ghidorah's mouth. Caligulio couldn't detect anything like that, but the empty slot on the hilt intrigued him. What could it mean? He had no way of telling. That's why he gave one to his technical department, but their analysis wasn't done yet. Of course, unlike in the West, the sword era's well and truly over in the Empire anyway. He was right. No matter what kind of value was locked inside this sword, it meant little to his modernized vision. Only a well-trained warrior could get much use out of it, one like Caligulio himself or his close advisors. That was why he couldn't wait to hear the results. A few days later, Caligulio received an astonishing report. "Allow me to explain," said his chief technician, who came over to deliver the analysis in person. Following a scientific examination, they had discovered quite a few things. For one, the slot wasn't a design touch. It was an energy absorption device, a vehicle for the efficient production of magic. This wasn't a sword at all, it was really more of a magic launcher. This is from the demon lord Rimuru? Then we sure can't make light of him, no. What an interesting idea. Absolutely so. I believe it's meant to confuse opponents into believing it's a close-range weapon, only to surprise them with magic. And if the right energy supply is inserted into a slot, the caster, or the wielder, I suppose, in this case, can cast magic with no effort at all. Yes, the most unique aspect of this weapon was how it let people non-sensitive to magic cast their own spells. It just flew in the face of common sense. But, the chief technician asked, "Are you sure this was discovered inside the labyrinth?" "Yes, we're sure about that. I sent some of my own men to the scene, and they backed up everything Ghidorah told us." Caligulio had sent a team of his own to the monster city of Rimuru to gather intel on the labyrinth. Their investigation hit a brick wall around the Floor 40 region, but a merchant gave them an interesting bit of info. Apparently these slotted weapons were discovered inside the labyrinth, and while they went at a premium on the market, they were still cheaper than unique class arms. So what are they for? Humph. Think about it a little. We only approve a new weapon after extensive testing, don't we? The chief technician was an intelligent man, but not at all a tactician. Only when Caligulio spelled it out for him did he understand their usefulness. "Ah, I see. So they're putting them in the hands of that massive crowd of adventurers and having them examine their performance. That does make logical sense. When we placed a Magistone into this slot, the sword immediately went up a rank and became a powerful magic sword, but we don't think their utility ends there. They'd need to experiment a great deal more to gain a full picture of it. I'm sure it would take them years." Right. So instead, they're more or less passing them out at random and letting the masses test them. And once they have all the data they need, I'm sure they're planning to take them all back. Caligulio had, to some extent, accurately read Rimuru's motives. Based on his own experience, he knew an experiment like this would take time to conduct. For now, these were strictly test weapons, but it'd still be dangerous to let them buy any more time. Humans were strange and interesting creatures. Some of them had a knack for stumbling upon the kernel of something brilliant, especially those who willingly exposed themselves to danger. It really is a smart idea, he mused. Literally conducting human experiments in a lab where nobody would ever die. We were told this bracelet was required for that, but our analysis hasn't produced any reportable results yet. If the rumors about that are true, it'd certainly be a boon to military training, wouldn't it? The chief technician took out a carefully sealed box and showed it to Caligulio. Inside was a resurrection bracelet, one of the treasures Ghidorah brought back. I'm sure this examples are fake, of course. Regardless, if our army can capture this labyrinth. If it did, and discovered this bracelet system to be the truth, the results for his force would be beyond substantial. Ho! You are an ambitious man, Sir Caligulio, but are you prepared to fight a demon lord over it? Of course I am. It'd be a bad move to challenge him for no reason, but the forest of Jura is right in the middle of our invasion route, and this labyrinth's at a spot we can't possibly ignore. Someone has to capture it. He. Well, it's all in how you frame it, I suppose. They exchanged a chuckle over this. Think about it, after all. In one fell swoop, we can secure a stable magic crystal supply and an efficient test space, and maybe the enemy's latest new weapons, if all goes well. In that case, it's imperative the armored division captures it before someone else does, isn't it, Sir Caligulio? No need to remind me. You can expect big news before long. The chief technician gave this a pleased smile. Caligulio returned the favor with a thin smile of his own. It'd seem the old man is losing his wits, though, said the technician. Seem? Oh, I'm sure of it. He's so distracted by the magic crystals, he failed to realize this sword, and the labyrinth itself, is the real prize. One unfortunate side effect of focusing so much on magic, no doubt. After all, a weapon that can change its rank is nothing short of a breakthrough. Caligulio believed his technician was right. Ghidorah was a great man, but the age of pure magic was over. A new wind called science was blowing across the land, and that combined with magic heralded the beginning of a new era. And that, you see, is why I'm better qualified to lead the armored division. That old man could have won my respect if he only knew where his place was. But if he's going to recruit Yuki for his schemes, I see no need to show him mercy. As he thought this, Caligulio began formulating a plan. Attempting to take on multiple demon lords would be ill-advised, but Rimuru alone would not be a problem. The Storm Dragon, one of the Empire's most fervent desires, was targeted for a takedown. They had a new weapon, developed by Caligulio himself, and with it they'd force the Storm Dragon to do their bidding. If they pulled it off, it'd pay huge dividends, even if it required some sacrifice, and yet Lord Ghidorah remained staunchly against it. That was the last straw, the one thing that made Caligulio and Ghidorah part ways. PFFT. Once we tame that evil dragon, the demon lord slime will be a pushover. Then we'll prove to the masses that we are the strongest force in the Empire. The time had come, and Caligulio couldn't be more excited. He'd break the nose of Ghidorah for all his insolence, and he'd firm his position within the Empire for good. But before he could, he needed to prove himself. He needed the dragon tamed, and the labyrinth captured, by his armored division. And to make that happen, it is time to march. I will make the proposal at the next Imperial Council. Ah, the day's finally here. Caligulio nodded. No need to wait for all their demon lord preparations to wrap up. He was ready to shut the mouths of anyone using that as an excuse for hesitation. You won't get your head start, Ghidorah. And Yuki, I bet you're ecstatic to have Ghidorah on your side, aren't you? Well, I'm about to teach you exactly where you belong, he sneered at all his foolish colleagues. They had every chance to gain valuable information, and they let it go by without even realizing it. They were all a bunch of imbecilic wannabes anyway, Caligulio was sure of it. But even as he derided his peers, his mind never stopped working. How could he glean the most profit from this? He thought this over as he began to assemble his full proposal to the Emperor. And with that, the Empire would begin to move. The Imperial Council was about to begin. The military officers, and the civil officials, too, seated in a neat row, were all nervous. This was not a peacetime gathering, and nobody else even dared venture near the great conference hall where the council took place. Things were different with this meeting, everyone could feel it. Everyone bowed their heads when the emperor's entry was announced. Behind the blind, they could sense someone, the United Emperor Ludora Nam-ul Nazca, supreme leader of the Nazca Namriam Ulmaria United Eastern Empire, the world's greatest military superpower. He never spoke directly to the masses, only through the blind could one be privy to his presence. He was the apex of society, and only his closest associates even laid eyes upon him. Simply being there overwhelmed all nearby. He was the sole commander, the absolute, and just a very small handful of people were permitted to voice their opinions around him. Nearly 200 people were assembled in the meeting hall. The commanders of each imperial division were there, along with their aides. So were the elite members of the Imperial Guardians, standing at attention in a clean, well-practiced line. Government ministers, and members of the House of Lords, filled the chamber's seats, a truly distinguished group of people, all with their heads bowed as one. Only the rustling of clothes echoed in the silence. Then all sound disappeared. With that signal, the Prime Minister motioned toward the Chief of Protocol. His Majesty Yi the Emperor. Everyone in the chamber voiced their greeting in unison, breaking the stillness like a mighty choir. So began the Imperial Council, one that would doubtlessly go down in history, for they were scheduled to debate the Empire's upcoming invasion. The meeting solemnly began. With regards to the large-scale campaign in the works, opinions among the council were divided into two factions, a cautious, conservative side and the more enthusiastic among those calling for war. The first topic for discussion: what pretense would they use to launch the war? It was a silly question, the emperor willed it, and so it shall be. But was war possible? That's where opinions differed. One side called for careful action, the other, an all-out trouncing. Meanwhile, the civil officials argued that they should begin with diplomatic efforts, a call to surrender, for example, or some threats to lay on the pressure. If the emperor believed the time for war had come, no one had the authority to defy him, but the imperial edict had yet to arrive, and so every side brought their own motivations to this council. The war was a matter of time, how to wage it was the issue. The demon lords, their domains dotted across the continent, were an annoyance, but none of them would take action unless their borders were violated. The real obstacle was the storm dragon, and the debate subsequently turned toward the forest of Jura. One council member voiced his opposition to the war. "If I may, Your Majesty, I am against this campaign." This was Lord Ghidorah, the Empire's greatest sorcerer, and he spoke without a hint of fear. How shamelessly timid. "You bring this up yet again, Sir Ghidorah?" He was rebuffed by Commander Caligulio of the Armored Division. This happened every time. They were the leaders of their respective factions, conservative and belligerent. "If we want to strike the West, that will not be an issue, but Veldora, that evil dragon, lurks in the forest of Jura. We have only confirmed the dragon's revival 2 years ago. How could we not be cautious?" Some voices agreed. Others derided Ghidorah for his weak-heartedness. Over 300 years had now passed since the Veldora massacre. The terror it caused had largely faded from people's minds. The Warhawks formed the majority faction. The situation didn't look as good for Ghidorah's side. Caligulio, sensing this, decided to fan the flames. "There is much, my lord, we can learn from your more cautious stance. However, as I've said here many times before, we now have foolproof measures against Veldora. With our new weapon, it is now fully possible to make that dragon bow to our commands." "That is absurd. This is not a forum to talk about your dreams, Sir Caligulio. Nobody can deny the possibility of it failing, so why would we not be cautious? Especially now, when the entirety of the forest is ruled over by a new demon lord. They say demon lords never form alliances, but there's no reason to go out of our way to antagonize one. We have word that the dragon is revived and working in a partnership with Rimuru, the new demon lord. And with any demon lord, the proper way to go about things is with a non-aggression pact. The Valley of Death that linked the Empire with the former domain of Clayman was large enough to march a large army through. That option, however, was off the table, for it meant making an unauthorized entry into the demon lord Milim's territory. If these were fertile lands, their army could proceed much faster than if they had to navigate a forest, but the advantage wasn't worth riling Milim over. Along similar lines, a path through the forest of Jura would put them within shooting distance of the west, but Veldora the Storm Dragon was back, and right next to him was the demon lord Rimuru. As Ghidorah saw it, there was no need to deliberately create more enemies. Several of the council's civil officials agreed with this, but Caligulio just snorted at it. In that case, Sir Ghidorah, are you asking the Empire to give up on its dearest of wishes? If they can't traverse the forest, it'd be difficult to deploy a substantial force in the west. Caligulio's question thus had the full support of the military behind it. Sir Caligulio is right, my lord. Before the mighty Empire, a demon lord is no threat at all. How can you be so disrespectful in front of His Majesty? Dare you defy the will of the Emperor, Sir Ghidorah? No. Think about it. Instead of taking on a demon lord, it is far wiser to win the cooperation of the Dwarven King. We'd suffer no casualties, and it would make seizing the west that much easier. Ghidorah tried to rebuke these opposing viewpoints. But one onlooker laughed at him. You are the one being absurd, Sir Ghidorah. The Dwarven King is renowned as the master of the sword. His predecessor was a mighty champion, and he is just as powerful. He is surrounded by a legion of other notorious heroes, all capable of putting up more resistance than any demon lord. I would relish the chance of waging battle against them, but that is not our main objective. Instead of fighting a group of champions, we would receive far more public support for slaying a demon lord. This shouting came from Gradim, the Beast King and commander of the Magical Beast Division. All he had to do was stand up, and the intimidation he exuded was overwhelming. He had the air of a ruler and the power to tame any magical creature. He was also one of the foremost fighters in the Empire, leader of a proud band of warriors. In terms of strength, the commander was said to be the second best in the Empire. He wasn't in the single digits rank-wise, but his powers had quickly earned him a post leading a division. Being in a position untouchable by any ranking duel made him believe he was the strongest, and thus Gradim resented the Empire's marshal, the one person higher than him in the military hierarchy. Some rumors said he had lycanthrope blood in him, but none of these had been confirmed. Whether that was true or not, Gradim was definitely the type to act on gut instincts instead of reason, and Ghidorah therefore had trouble dealing with him. Sir Gradim, I fear you are making an incorrect comparison. I am saying that we should make King Garzel our ally. Fool. If we were going to annex the Dwarven Kingdom as well, your point would make sense. If anyone gets in the way of the Empire's ambitions, all we have to do is pound them into submission. But what kind of scheme is this? We have all the war power we need, and we still can't take action because of this tepid nonsense you're spouting at us. Don't be ridiculous. The Dwarven Kingdom is a natural fortress. The idea of taking it down by force is simply silence. Why must you continue your pathetic mewling in front of the Emperor? This is exactly why you were dismissed from your role as division leader. Gradim the Beast King shouted at the top of his lungs. He was telling the truth. Until about 30 years ago, the Ghidorah-led Magic Division was one of the three major ones the Empire boasted. Now, though, all its best talents were reassigned to technical departments, and the others shuffled into other posts. This was because magic, at the heart of it, depended on the talents of individual casters. First, you needed magic force to cast anything, and that wasn't something you could acquire in a class, that limited the numbers right there. Second, while magic was an effective tool in battle, the Empire had developed a weapon that all but supplanted it, a portable magical weapon, commonly called a spellgun. These were powered by magistones that activated a magic circle carved inside the gun barrel, allowing anyone control over magic. A single spellgun could generate only one type of magic, which was a disadvantage, but their usefulness still couldn't be overstated. Meanwhile, for close-range combat, the Empire had developed magic sabers. These handheld weapons operated on the same principle as spellguns. They were small arms pre-installed with magic. The example they set was part of why Imperial military technicians could pinpoint what the dungeon-made slotted weapons were for. It was clear now that both sides of this conflict were thinking in similar ways. And now that even those without natural talent could cast magic, the role of the magic division was over. It was the end of an era, a melancholy moment for Ghidorah. But the scorn for Ghidorah wasn't over yet. Ha ha ha. You are well advanced in years, my lord. Your magic knowledge is the treasure of the Empire. You have given untold assistance to the Armored Division's development of new magical weapons, but as Sir Gradim stated, you're speaking out of line. Have you completely lost your nerve? Caligulio gave him a mocking laugh. Snickering bubbled up from the seats of the military and the House of Lords. Don't any of you understand? That evil dragon holds control over natural disasters. He is one of the most powerful presences in the entire world. You are the one who fails to understand, my lord. The Imperial military is not what it used to be. We have studied the knowledge of many from other worlds, the science they have brought with them. We have obtained an entirely new and different technology from what this world knew before, and with this new technology, our army has grown dozens of times more powerful than the last generation. Sorcerers like you are anachronisms, failing to keep up with the march of time. It is time for you to accept His Majesty's good graces and humbly announce your retirement. What? Ghidorah fumed at this, but it was just an act. He had, after all, already capitulated to the demon Lord Rimuru. He was trying to guide the council away from war, but beyond that, he didn't care much what came next. I pity every one of these buffoons. Science is a wondrous thing, but the sorceress dynasty of Thalion has its own secret knowledge, sorceress science, they call it. Sir Rimuru himself is an otherworlder. And the Empire may be kept secure by its military might, but for how long? Now that he knew the truth about Tempest, and about Rimuru, victory for the Empire seemed very uncertain to Ghidorah. He didn't wish misfortune upon his former colleagues, and he felt a debt of obligation to the Emperor. That's why he made an honest effort to steer the Empire off its course, but if it failed, he wouldn't dwell on it. Yuki had a coup simmering anyway, and once it broke out, Ghidorah intended to keep the Emperor secure. He was sure Yuki wanted the Emperor assassinated. If he planned to conquer the world, then all its leading figures were nothing but obstacles. Before now, he let him do what he wanted, but now that he had no reason at all to wage war, Ghidorah could no longer allow Yuki's schemes to plunge the world into chaos. I can't say what'll happen in the future, but I doubt what I say here will change anything. Now, I suppose, I'll fulfill Sir Rimuru's request and build up more excitement for the dungeon. With that tacit decision, Ghidorah turned his eyes toward Yuki, who, up to now, hadn't said a word. Seeing Ghidorah fall silent, Caligulio assumed victory was his. Ghidorah's magic division was dismantled in the military's last major reshuffling. Since then, Ghidorah had been treated as a technical advisor for the Armored Division, an honorary post and nothing else. But he was widely known for his champion-level powers, and he may still have had more influence around the Empire than Caligulio himself. And it was Ghidorah, and Ghidorah alone, who recommended Yuki as a division leader. Simply infuriating. Caligulio didn't like it one bit. The great Ghidorah, lauded as a master sorcerer, was an old man, but his career was filled with meritorious deeds. He knew he couldn't afford to shed his politeness when dealing with him. But he's a relic of the past. Now he's nothing but a crotchety old man, a drain on all of us. Over time, the Empire had grown into a superpower in war. And as sad as it was, poor old Ghidorah simply couldn't keep up with that. The Empire was in a new era, and its 3 new military divisions were incomparably stronger than before. The Armored Division Caligulio led was the largest military division in the Empire, driven by a combination of otherworld science and magical technology. Its force consisted of over 2 million deployable soldiers, but this included troops garrisoned across Imperial territory. Only about 1 million could engage in maneuvers on a moment's notice, but this was still an army on a stupefying scale, one unthinkable 100 years ago. The Magical Beast Division Gradim led was using DNA analysis technology brought by otherworlders to capture and raise magical beasts. The tamed, powered-up creatures this program produced now formed the core of this division. Nothing like this had ever been attempted before with such beasts, but this division made it happen, and thanks to their effort, the Empire could even train magical beasts as battle mounts. These were used by the Empire's greatest champions, those who analyzed the blood of ancient heroes and made it their own. These champions were innately powerful, and awakening the forces within their blood allowed the Magical Beast Division to recruit nothing but these champions. It was a comparatively small division, only around 30,000, just 1 in 100,000 had this kind of talent, but their mounts were magical beasts, at least A- in quality, and when matched with the right champion, their power was incalculable. It was truly an elite force, worthy of being a full division despite its smaller size. Finally, the composite division Yuki led was a group of talented individuals with extremely powerful latent abilities. The general public considered this division a hodgepodge of scrappy odds and ends lacking any real cooperative spirit, but that wasn't the right way to describe them. They didn't work well with others because they were already pretty omnipotent by themselves. As a band of exceptional, tough-to-control individuals, they had many talented otherworlders, their latent potential anybody's guess. It was populated by those with irregular traits, things that couldn't be reproduced after extensive experimentation, difficult to handle, but packing more of a punch than an A-rank magical beast. They may not have known what their abilities were, exactly, but as weapons, they were too good to dispose of, and this force was where such accomplished people were inserted. They had barely been supervised up to this point, but with Yuki as the division's new leader, it was reborn as a treasured force, one whose powers couldn't be defined by pure numbers. They totaled some 200,000 people, about half of whom were deployable, the rest were commissioned intelligence officers, office staff, and so forth. That, and within the composite division was also a specially selected elite force, the foundation of the entire division, one absolutely faithful to Yuki. This was the composition of the Empire's 3 new military divisions. It was a formidable power, and the moment the Emperor gave the edict, 1,130,000 soldiers could likely begin operations at once. According to the Imperial Information Bureau's latest intelligence, the Western nation's total fighting power was under 1 million troops. In terms of what was deployable right then, they'd likely be happy to gather 400,000. Even more encouraging, the IIB expressed doubts that this could act as a coherent force, due to expected logistical difficulties. It was thus an unruly mob of 400,000 against over 1 million Imperial-trained elites. The numbers were simply overwhelming. And right at the core of this overwhelming Imperial force was Caligulio's armored division. Caligulio intended to bring his own hand-picked forces out on the field to handle this war. He planned to deploy 1 million soldiers, as follows. The restructured Armor Corps, the division's main force. These soldiers boasted the latest in otherworld technology and magical modifications. As individuals, each one ranked at least a C+, and some had even reached A rank. The Magitank Force, their most decisive weapons. This was a squadron of 3,000 Magitanks, the latest new Imperial weapon brought into practical use. Each one had a crew of 5, and they offered firepower that broke all previous rules. Their main armament, known as a Magicannon, could fire bolts that shot out at 2,000 yards per second. A Magitank could hold 50 of these bolts, firing them up to 5 times a minute, and they packed a punch, the equivalent of a tactical-level high-speed flame spell. Although these bolts were launched with magic, fundamentally, the shots themselves were simple metal balls. They could still smash through things like anti-magic barriers and anti-archery defenses, making them a fearsome mass-based offense. Thanks to that, the kind of force you once needed a wizard to unleash, assuming you could find one, was now at the beck and call of a common soldier. These Magitanks resulted in a major breakthrough for the army, due to the difficulty of defending against them. 200,000 soldiers were assigned to this force, including mechanics and other personnel, and the more tanks you added, the more powerful it had become. the Flying Combat Corps, responsible for a set of highly classified weapons. This consisted of 400 flying airships, the treasure of the Empire and a testament to the grand new knowledge the Otherworlders brought with them. Each airship could house up to 400 people, a staff of 50 piloting them, while the rest handled defensive magic or operated the cannons. They were fitted with many magically amplified guns, making them warships bristling with offense and defense, and they were also useful as transportation craft. In this world, the concept of air superiority didn't really exist. No army paid any attention to anti-air defense, so the Empire could transport large forces while the enemy's guard was down. Airships could also assist in surrounding an enemy on the front and rear, making pincer attacks child's play, another invention that turned conventional tactics on their head. 100,000 people were assigned to this corps, mostly members taken from the old magic division. With this many soldiers at his beck and call, Caligula was basking in a feeling of omnipotence. For example, the average strength of a knight in this world would be around C rank at best, although it varied depending on the size of a nation. Pad that strength with weapons or armor and put them through grueling training, and you might see that brought up to a B. Meanwhile, the armored division put its members through assorted magical modifications. After a health evaluation, anyone deemed fit enough for it was half-forced into the operation. This successfully lifted the baseline for the entire division, and that was true for the forces stationed elsewhere across the Empire. They were like an insurmountable rock, Caligula was sure of it. For this grand campaign, he planned to deploy all the magitanks and airships at his disposal. He had enough soldiers to overwhelm any foreign alliance, in quality and quantity, and he had so many new weapons to unveil. As he saw it, the armored division was the best way of showing the full might of the Empire to the world. Why worry about Veldora? Why worry about a demon lord? My division alone could conquer the whole world. It was with that confidence that Caligula observed Ghidorah. That was why he noticed the sorcerer's eyes shifting over to Yuki, and the next moment, Yuki spoke up for the first time in this Imperial Council, as if he'd been waiting for the opportunity. I agree that old man Ghidorah's overly careful. I think he's just being too wary, and I'm counting the storm dragon when I say that, too. Like Commander Caligula said, the Empire as it stands now wouldn't have a problem against him, don't you think? The fact that Yuki seemed to agree with Caligula put him on alert. That bastard. He's gonna nominate himself to capture the labyrinth, isn't he? You may think I'm not onto you, but you're wrong. You can't hold a post as lofty as division commander without keeping yourself well informed. As Caligula thought this, he flashed Yuki a friendly smile. Gradim was an exception to that rule, but really, it was only his scale-breaking strength that put him at the top of his division. Yuki, meanwhile, was Caligula's enemy from the start. The post was far too lofty for him still, he believed. Well put, Sir Yuki, he said, biting his tongue. A young, energetic leader knows how to build momentum for himself, I see. I'm no one that special, but the way I see it, we still have some scout work to do before we can run a war, right? If we want to make it through the forest of Jura, we're gonna need to proceed through the demon lord Raimuru's domain. And along those lines, actually, I have some interesting news. Apparently the demon lord city can be transported completely inside the labyrinth. The labyrinth? Caligula asked, feigning ignorance. Yeah, replied Yuki, as if expecting this. The dungeon, to be precise. I don't know how it works, but it allows them to make the entire city disappear from the surface, leaving nothing but a large gate. Humph. How absurd. Now I'm sure he's going to volunteer to go explore the dungeon himself and steal away all my interests, but it's so terribly shallow of him. Oh? Caligula gave Yuki a gloating smile. Are you sure about that intelligence? If it's true, said another council member, we cannot ignore this dungeon. They may emerge from it to attack us once we march past. Indeed, assuming the Empire's no fool, I'm sure they're shoring up their defense lines as we speak. If the Demon Lord's forces cut off our supply lines, we'll be in trouble. That could make the forest of Jura route dangerous. Everyone who heard Yuki began giving out a smorgasbord of feedback. Yuki grinned as if this was exactly what he'd been seeking all along. There's no doubting the credibility of this intelligence, no. Old man Ghidorah went over there himself and examined it for us. He had waited for just the right moment to say that, but he wasn't done yet. Now, the things old man Ghidorah saw have convinced him that the demon Lord Rimuru is a threat. And he also brought back another rumor. It said that the labyrinth goes down 100 floors, and that the guardian on the deepest floor is none other than Veldora, the storm dragon. Now, there's no evidence backing this rumor at all. Ghidorah's investigations ended on the 60th floor after his team sadly took some losses. It said not even Masayuki the hero has made it past that floor. In terms of difficulty, we believe it would rank an A+ equivalent, and no matter what route we take to invade the West, I think this requires further investigation. Now Yuki was sounding serious, doing away with his carefree attitude. Losses? Quite a pity. I can understand Sir Yuki's feelings. An investigation certainly wouldn't be uncalled for. Perhaps we could leave that to the composite division? The nobles excitedly talked among themselves. It rankled Caligulio. TCHH. You fools were all bought off by him. How dare you try to talk your way into this, Yuki? You should have become a politician, not an army commander. But the sincerity of Yuki's attitude was even starting to turn the minds of the nobles he didn't bribe. It only further provoked Caligulio. One moment, please, he shouted as he stood up and bowed to the emperor behind the blind. Your Highness. Lord Ghidorah and Sir Yuki seem absolutely petrified of Veldora, but not I, and that goes without saying for the Western nations as well. It is my fervent hope that I may soothe your mind, Your Majesty, so please, give me, Caligulio, the order to begin our conquest. I promise to you I will stake my body and soul in the ensuing battle. The statement sent a shiver through the chamber. Addressing the emperor directly was far beyond the realms of convention. What? Of all the outrageous things to do. This will not stand, Sir Caligulio. Trying to get a leg up on the competition, Caligulio? Your Majesty, our magical beast division is ready to deploy on a moment's notice. Please, grant us your order as well. Even Gradim was entering the fray. In that case, a frazzled-looking Yuki added, allow the composite division to investigate this. With him standing up as well, all three commanders were bowing their heads at once. At this point, only the emperor could put an end to this commotion. Him, or one other. This figure stood up behind the blind and smiled sweetly. She was the imperial marshal, the supreme commander of the empire's forces. All right, you idiots, quiet down. You are in the presence of Emperor Ludora. Calling the emperor by his given name was an affront no common citizen could dream of. Only someone granted the rank of marshal could do so without fear of consequences. In the empire, being marshal meant being the strongest. Only a very few close associates knew who she was. Not even the rank holder's name was revealed to the public. It was said she was always attending to the emperor, protecting him. A few words from her were all it took to silence the meeting hall. Now, as everyone in attendance fell to the ground to pay their respects, the marshal's voice boomed from high above. So what of this Veldora? He may have interfered with our previous campaign, but did that shake the empire? No. Of course not. And that is because our great emperor has afforded us his divine protection. Yes, ma'am. It was beyond overpowering. An air of dominance filled the room, leaving everyone powerless to resist it. And in the midst of it, the marshal asked. Yuki, was it? You have been in the empire for not even a year, and I must praise your achievements. However, you are soft, too soft. From the moment Veldora resurrected himself until now, the empire has not taken any action. Do you know why? Because we were not fully prepared. This was already well-trodden territory, but Yuki gave the answer anyway. But the marshal answered him with a scornful smile. No. It's because the idiots among us were so stricken by fear of the past, they made up this or that excuse to run away. Isn't that right, Ghidorah? Aye, indeed it is. Everyone, deep down, knew that to be true, and not even Ghidorah had the willpower to say no. It was true, he had argued for avoiding battle instead of debating whether they could beat the storm dragon. He had no leg to stand on. But what is this? Why is she, of all people, in such a panic? Ghidorah was one of the few people who had seen the marshal's face. That's why he could tell, despite her detached air, that she was growing impatient. But he couldn't bring it up here. Instead, Ghidorah felt a vague anxiety, one whose reason he couldn't put into words, as the marshal continued. There's no way negotiations with King Garzel of Dworgen would go well, is there? I'm sure you understand that, so why be so stubborn about it? Or are all of you more idiotic than I thought? You're not trying to interfere with the Empire's dominance, are you? The cold voice made Ghidorah's spine freeze. Had she spotted me out? He couldn't believe it. He was a senior member of the Empire, one who served as counsel for the Emperor, but even he found himself cringing in the presence of the Marshal. And come to think of it, I still don't even know her name. Ghidorah was trusted. He was treasured, there was no doubt about that. But maybe that was all just Ghidorah kidding himself. The thought felt like a shock wave, and then, for the first time, he began to wonder what the Empire, or really, the Emperor, actually was. Turning away from him, the Marshal set his sights on Caligulio. So, Caligulio, you like your chances of victory? Why yes, Marshal. I absolutely do. Ah. Then tell us about your strategy. Well. He was in high spirits earlier, but the full brunt of the Marshal's dominant presence bowled Caligulio over. His plan to bulldoze the enemy with sheer quantity, it made him realize, seemed so childish now. Caligulio did have his own plan for the fight against the storm dragon, an intricate plan he had carefully worked out over the course of many years. He wasn't afraid of Valdora, he's just a dragon, he thought. And yes, the dragons of the Cainit Mountains were tough monsters to face. The lesser dragons at the foot of the peaks were one thing, but once they had grown into full-fledged adult specimens, they ranked at least an A in strength. Once you got to an element-infused archdragon, that was dangerous enough to upend a small kingdom. Not so with the Empire. All they'd have to do is deploy a force of 500 from the restructured Armor Corps, and they could subdue him. They had undergone repeated military training for just this mission, and as long as they didn't make any mistakes, they wouldn't lose too many men. That, if anything, proved the Empire's power.